Welcome into the I-80 Club +1. Josh Peterson, Jack Mitchell with you here live on the I-80 Club YouTube page. We would love to have you like and subscribe. And you know him from the Jack Mitchell softball experience.
Mainly.
As well as ESPN. It's our good friend Max Olson joining us for the first time in the I-80 Club. Max, how are you, man?
I'm good. Yeah, if I had an IMDb page, that would be my top credit, I think, at this point. Is the JMSE 2024 performances.
Are you sad that the season's over?
Very sad. I know. It was weird this week to just like not drink 2 beers on Tuesday. You know what I mean? Like it's sort of you're sitting at home being a good dad and husband, and you're like, shouldn't I be doing something else? You know? I had to miss the playoff game too. So I ended very abruptly.
Oh, it was intense, man. Oh God, we got to talk about that at some point. It was very intense. Great game. There was actually we have a team text thread, and on Tuesday there was some real grief in the text thread from some of the players who just felt empty knowing that there wasn't going to be a game after we had a game once a week basically through April at that point. So
I texted the group text because I was missing. I missed our final game for work reasons, and I was putting my kid to bed, and I texted the group text and was like, "Hey, did we win?" Because there was just I think 45 minutes passed since when the game was over, and nobody had sent a text. And I said, "Hey, did we win?" And somebody replied, "Yeah, we won." And I just sent a GIF. I was so fired up, and then a minute later, they were like, "No, of course we didn't win."
I'm trying to figure out who would have trolled. Was it Jacob Bigelow? Was it Bigelow who said that they won?
Who was it? Do you even remember?
I don't remember. No.
I don't remember. But shout out to Max though, because we're not gonna spend the entire time talking about the Jack Mitchell softball experience. But so the first time I ever talked to Max, this is crazy, Josh, was when he was doing your show. And I was sitting in for John. I don't remember when it was. Maybe this
summertime time?
Some winter, or maybe no, because we played softball this summer. It was before April.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It was before April, and I didn't know him. And so Max, this is a funny story. So I had I knew your name. I knew that you covered college football. I didn't know, I didn't even know you were connected here to Nebraska or were here. I didn't know any of that. And so we get done with the interview, and I say to Josh, and I was like, when you come in, I should give this background for the viewers and the listeners. Sometimes you come into an interview with a guest, especially, a national guest, and you're like, you just don't know. Josh, you get what I'm saying? You just don't know exactly how enthusiastic they're going to be about the interview.
100%. Did they agree just to be nice, or did they agree because they want to come on? Yeah.
And I
also just the difference between Twitter versus real life too. Sometimes you can be if you ever meet people that you recognize on Twitter and you meet them in person, you're sort of like, oh, okay, they're kind of
not what I expected.
So I had no idea what to. Josh just told me you were going to be on. I came up with some questions. I asked you some questions, and I remember you brought something up about the video game, the NCAA video game, in the first answer, and then we went back and forth laughing and talking about that. And we got done with the interview, and I turned to Josh. I was like, I really like that guy. I was like, I didn't know anything about him. I really like that guy. I like that interview. And he was like, yeah, well, I know him.
We had math class together in college.
We had math class in college.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, what? Really? You did? Yep. I had no idea. And so that was kind of my first, it was a very positive exposure. That's how I met Max. And then shout out to Max, because he just, I had put out some of the stuff about the softball, and he DM'd me, not knowing me a ton, and said he might be interested in it. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping people would do. I'd love to have you, and was a valuable teammate throughout the year. Now, a good story about Max is we've got a left fielder on our team who does not wear a hat for some reason. He's one of my buddies. He's about my age. He's a basketball coach. Hatless Tony Siski. And he doesn't wear a hat, but he plays left field. And so we were on a field where the sun was directly in his eyes. And Siski wouldn't wear a hat. And Max was like, I have these sunglasses you can wear if you want. And Max had sunglasses that, if I recall, appeared to be from the Pac-12 media days at some point. They were Pac-12 Media Day sunglasses.
The cheapest sunglasses ever. Close to free. Yeah.
But Max was in there, the Pac-12, and saved it, and Siski wore them. I think he wore them for an inning, and he made a couple of catches. Then he took them off again, but that was amazing. So
they served absolutely no purpose for Siski. They did not defend him against the sun whatsoever, but he gave it a try.
Yes, he did. Shout out Hatless Tony. Hey, will you, Max? Now that we know each other a little, but like I still don't know a ton about kind of your journey into the career, getting to where you're obviously at a huge place now at a young age, and it's really cool to see how many followers you got. You're with ESPN now, but can you kind of give the people who are watching and me just a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of where how you got to where you are right now in the career?
Yeah. So I grew up in Lincoln. We moved here from California in 1996. I was 6 years old. So that, certainly that heyday, I was a little young for that. We're the same age, right, Josh?
Yeah. My
So
first year that I remember is 97 in full.
Yeah, right.
And I graduated high school in 96.
Yeah, that sounds about right. And I think I couldn't guess your age today, honestly.
Thanks.
I grew up here. Well, moved here from elementary school, and I think probably for me when the college football thing clicked, probably was like Crouch era, probably like 01. You start kind of understanding what Nebraska football is about a little bit. But honestly, I didn't go to a lot of games growing up. Our family didn't have tickets or anything like that. I didn't really start, but I think, over time you fall in love with Husker football and college football, just growing up around here in this kind of environment where it's the biggest thing in town. And, honestly, probably playing the video game obsessively probably made me a lot more interested in the sport overall. But yeah, I kind of figured out pretty early. I went to Lincoln Southwest and kind of figured out early on freshman year when I couldn't make any of the sports teams there because it was too many students at that school who were much better than me. Kind of figured out I wanted to do the student newspaper, wanted to go into journalism. And, I think that have just kind of been pretty focused on this goal probably since I was a freshman in high school. And, went to UNL, met Josh there. He was doing radio even then, back in 08, 09. And, just got very fortunate in my time in college to, work with the Daily Nebraskan throughout. And that was so, foundational for me in terms of learning how to be a writer. But then got to work with Omaha World Herald, got to work, Sean Callahan. I got to give him a lot of credit. He hooked me up with Jeremy Crabtree at Rivals, and that working for him for a summer led to, the opportunity I got out of college. And, when I was a junior, Jeremy Crabtree reached out to me and was like, "Hey, I'm going to ESPN to launch basically their version of Rivals." And he was just like, "How quickly can you graduate?" And so between the summer and fall of my junior year, I took like 30 hours and graduated with the bare minimum number of credits to graduate. And so, but got very lucky. They were launching that thing at that time. And I'd worked for him for a summer practically for free, just making calls to West Coast recruits for them, and just learning how to interview recruits and learn how to write it up. They'd let me write up every fifth one that I did, so that was kind of cool. And they were launching it, and for them, this is the time when in 2011 when they had launched the Longhorn Network, and so the Texas market was going to be a big one for their recruiting site operation that they were calling Recruiting Nation. And so they're like, "Can you move down to Austin and do this?" And obviously that's every Husker's dream to move down to Austin, Texas, and cover Mac Brown and the Longhorns. But man, it was just a crazy opportunity to get in the door at 21, 22 or whatever at ESPN. And certainly a lot of fake it till you make it with that. And so we lived down in Texas for 7 years. Loved it. That was a great place to spend our 20s, me and my wife. And that was, that job went from covering Texas recruiting to covering Texas the Beat. And, that was end of Mac Brown, started Charlie Strong, all that, and then turned into covering the Big 12. And back when they had the conference blogs, and, that was, crazy experience to get. And then got to go to the Athletic when they were launching their college football site. And did that for the last 7 years, and now we're back at ESPN. So it's been very fortunate. We were able to move back here when we were ready to have kids, and you can kind of do it now. It's a national job; you can kind of do it from anywhere. I think COVID kind of helped reinforce that a little bit. That Zooms and phone calls and stuff, you can kind of do this job from wherever. And so, yeah, it's been a fun ride for sure, and been very fortunate to get to do what I do and cover this sport. And honestly, it's such an insane time for the sport. It is a 12-month deal now. And, that makes it a lot of fun to cover.
Max, one more before we get to this season. And you know that I loved you and Ari and Ubben on Until Saturday. RIP that iteration of the podcast. But when you are in college and wanting to start your career, it's all about written word. And of course, the job very much has changed for all of us in media over the last decade plus. Like, what has it been like for you to kind of be involved in all of that as podcasts has become so important? You were involved with a very successful one. I don't know what the exact future looks like for you in that regard with ESPN, but I mean, it just getting all those reps, it had to be really interesting along the way.
Yeah, in my first year down in Austin, like I said, they launched the Longhorn Network, and so they would bring me on to talk when it was time to talk about recruiting, and they would do a live signing day show, and they'd have me on for that. And I had no idea what I was doing. Like, it was very like right away when you start doing that, you're like, shit, I probably should have taken some college classes for broadcasting. Like, I completely blew that off. Never thought I'd be, that was never the ambition. I was never like trying to anchor Sports Center or anything like that. Right. And so, yeah, you just don't know what you don't know. And so between that and, same, like I probably should have taken some radio classes and understood that, because podcasts are such a big part of our day to day now. And, obviously the college education also doesn't prepare you for social media at all at that time when we were in school, Josh. Like, there's just so many parts of this job now that you wish you like actually had some education and training in it, as opposed to just doing it and getting a tiny bit better day by day on it. But it's funny. Like, when I like try to, when I sit down for coffee with like college students, you sort of tell them like, just try to do everything. I wish I had tried to do everything. Because the writing skills are very useful. There's no doubt. But like, man, that was when I was at Daily Nebraska, and they were doing 5 papers a week. Right. And you had to fill the paper, and it was a traditional newspaper type of job. And that's not what it is now either. Right. And so like those reps were so helpful in terms of learning how to write and gaining some confidence. But yeah, man, there's a lot I can't do that I wish I knew how to do.
It's hard to tell, but I didn't take one broadcasting class either during all of college. I'm sure that's very shocking to anyone that's listening right now. But I was a poli-sci major, and then I went to law school, which was a great way to prepare for doing a morning radio show and hanging out with Josh on StreamYard.
But when you get thrown to the deep end, you actually gain an appreciation for the people who are good at it too. You know what I mean? You're sort of like, oh yeah, I don't know how to do this. You know how to do this well. I respect to the TV folks.
Yeah, for sure. Let's bridge this into talking about what's happening currently, both with Nebraska and the greater college football world. Just kind of tell us what, like, into this season, what are you covering? What are you doing? What are you watching? Who are you talking to for your job right now at ESPN?
Yeah, it's been September was a crazy month. I just started this job August 1st, and you kind of wasn't totally sure what to expect. Like, I came back to be a national college football writer, and definitely to cover a lot of the transfer portal. That was kind of the main thing that ESPN was looking for in bringing me back. And so, and obviously that hits in December, so we got a ways away. But yeah, it's been a pretty nutty month here. I think I've been to 4 games already. I was at Nebraska, Colorado. And then I got to cover Kansas State, Arizona. And then I went down for Texas's game against UL Monroe for Arch Manning's first start. And then last week I went to Las Vegas for UNLV Fresno State after all the chaos at UNLV last week. And looks like I'm going to be going back to Boulder next week when they play K-State. I talked to Kurt Signetti this week for Indiana story I'm working on. It's a fun job. It's you got a great team of people who cover the sport as good as anybody, but you just never kind of know. Like, I went to Vegas on Friday, and we didn't know I was going to Vegas until Wednesday night. You know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of we're at that time of year where you're just making it up as you go in terms of the content. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And it's, I certainly, I think there'll be more Nebraska stuff here coming up. As a guy I moved back here in 2019, I live just north of campus here, pretty close. I think it's probably 5-10 minutes to the stadium. Like, I think for my job, it would make my job a lot easier if Nebraska was, top 25, nationally relevant, all that. So we've been waiting on that for a minute. So I think there'll be some more Nebraska coverage here coming up too.
Max, let me ask you about the UNLV situation, because it feels like things are coming to a head, certainly with the portal, with NIL conversations, the 4-game redshirt rule, which has been like this thing kind of on the back burner for a few years in terms of regular discourse when the focus is on the other stuff. I feel like this year might change that a little bit. I wonder what you have made of all of this at this particular moment in time when it's obvious that we are going to get some changes at some point in the next few years, not to mention playoff stuff. What a wild September it was, especially given the Shukla situation.
Yeah, I think that deal is pretty uncommon because honestly, the common thing, especially at like the Power 5 level, if a player or his parent or his representation goes to the coach and says, I need to be paid money or paid more money or else I'm leaving, usually they pay him the money and that kid stays. That's just usually, or if it's happening in December, then they'll hit the portal, right? But this was a unusual one in that for a 3-0 team, the quarterback of a 3-0 team to say, hey, I was promised $100,000 and I haven't gotten any of it. I got $3,000 to go to the coach and say, hey, I need to get paid or I'm done. And the coach is saying, all right, see ya. It's a super uncommon circumstance that, it's common for coach, for players to get promised a lot during the recruiting process, get to the school, find out they can't make that much. It's certainly common for players to go ask for more money and stuff like that. I think this kid was just seeking the money that he thought he was going to get, but he and his people never got it in writing. And so it was a very strange deal. And then the backup, Haj Malik Williams, comes in and plays better than Sluka did. So and now UNLV's in the top 25, AP top 25 for the first time in program history. So I think they're just watching them against Fresno State. I mean, they were dominant. That is a team that has a chance to be that group of 5 team in the playoff, that potentially that 12 seed. And so and Barry Odom, who obviously comes with a lot of Power 5 experience, is doing a great job there. They're only in year 2 there, so I think he'll be a hot candidate. I think they got a chance when they play Boise at the end of October. That could be for a playoff spot in a lot of ways, So I think it's, but yeah, the economics of it, super strange. And honestly, part of it is just that is what it looks like at the group of 5 level right now. You can't just, go find $100,000 to make the problem go away. You have it or you don't. And so it's crazy. And we've seen some players hit the portal this week or opt out redshirt for the 4-game redshirt. I think one thing you could kind of help with that in the future, and you hear this from coaches now, after we've gone through this experience of basically giving guys 6 years to play 5, I think there's an understanding of like, let's just give players 5 years and not mess with red shirts. They play or they don't play, but it's not about saving an extra year. Just give them 5 years to play 5. Will that become will there be like problems with that? Maybe a little bit, but like that's kind of what it already is now. So I think that might help a little bit so that players and their reps aren't looking at this saying, ooh, if we redshirt now, then we can play another season next year.
Yeah. And I don't know that there are it doesn't feel like it restricts player freedom or kind of the new rights that players have and those sorts of things either. I am curious though, Max, like from as far as how frequent is it that what happened at UNLV, just in terms of the representations the coach made to the player? Because I had in my head that, here in Nebraska, for instance, that they've got, they've always got written contracts between a collective and a player.
Yeah.
Although I've never seen them, I'm very curious kind of what they look like, to be honest. I'm super curious as a lawyer, especially to see what they look like. I know some of them have gotten out there, but do you understand that it happens particularly often, that there are kind of these verbal, hey, we'll get you this if you go? And if so, doesn't that bring just a ton of enforceability questions, contractual questions, legal questions, or is that a pretty rare deal? What happened at UNLV? I
think UNLV is rare. I think certainly the Power 4 level, those collectives are having players sign agreements, and those agreements, they don't mean that you cannot transfer. There's not there's not those kinds of restrictions, obviously, but we're at a point now where you can get them signed, and there is some when you saw Caden Proctor leave Iowa, nowadays these guys can have agreements where the collective can say we get our money back, right? So I think that there's ways to do that now and have some enforceability. I think in the UNLV case, they sort of approached it like, well, we can't get him signed to something until he gets to campus, and then once he got to campus, then they were trying to lock in like $3,000 a month as opposed to, $1,000 or $100,000. That kind of switcheroo is not going to play anywhere, right? That's going to be a problem for anybody. But yeah, I mean, I think that, how this stuff then collides with revenue sharing next year will be really interesting. I mean, these guys are going to make more money than they have in the past. But that also means that you've got, that raises their value. And so in a case like Sluka, like he probably does believe like, look, I'm going to go in the portal, and I know this is not a great headline for me, but I'm going to find somewhere to go. And so interested to see where he ends up. I'm sure some coaches will kind of hold it against him that he could on his team or whatever. But, I think it's, you kind of expect it now. This is just a lot more transactional. It is more like the NFL now.
Yeah, certainly. Max, you mentioned earlier when you moved back to Nebraska, that was 2019. So I wanted to ask you about the Huskers, but kind of couch it in the Matt Rule discussion, because you were still in Texas when he got to Baylor. So you were there for his first 2 seasons. And then when you got back to Lincoln is his last year there before he went to the NFL. How so far does this year 2, 4-1 going into this matchup versus Rutgers, remind you of, or maybe how is it different from what you remember about that second Matt Rule-led Baylor team back in 2018?
Yeah, I think that, certainly year 1 at Baylor was a lot worse, a lot more, man, we're in a deep hole here. And for obvious reasons, in terms of what came before him. And so, it felt a little bit more, it was very impressive and almost a little bit more miraculous that they had a bowl team in year 2 with just the progress they made. But I think that, it does. There's definitely similarity. Like I think you can tell, no matter wins and losses, we'll see where this team ends up. But like you can tell they're where they want to be in terms of the internal, in terms of the process, in terms of the culture. Like and having guys that are super bought in on this staff and the way they do things. I mean, I think that you're not hearing a lot of, oh man, this is the kind of a messy locker room. We have to clean it up at the end of the season. Like I think they've got. There's everybody's got their worth and stuff, but like I think these guys have got it figured out pretty quickly. I think they like the players that they inherited from the Frost regime, and like that those kids' commitment to trying to get better and to buying into the way they want to do things. And I think that was certainly a battle at Baylor, and just getting buy-in, getting guys that could stay out of trouble. You don't see a lot of that in Nebraska. Like I think that they have done a good job. In terms of improving the roster, but improving it with guys that get it and are here for the right reasons and not just here for a payday or something like that. Like I think it's very encouraging how it's looking. And I think that it's funny when I talk to people in this region, Big 12 staffers and other schools, they look at Nebraska and they're like, man, that facility is sick. Like they are set up to be, a problem. I think that's kind of where Nebraska is right now. I think that you look at them and say like, all right, they're setting up to, now they've got the quarterback too, obviously, but like they're setting up to make a run here. And so, you just got to stick to the day by day of getting this thing right. But I don't know, guys, it feels pretty real right now, right? It doesn't feel like very smoke and mirrors and, Rayola's not that good, but they're making him look good. Like, no, I think they got some pretty good players this year.
Max, you kind of got into what I was going to ask you. You're talking to other conferences staffers. For better or worse, there's always kind of an interest. I've got it. I think the fan base has it about what the national media perception is of Nebraska. Sometimes that might be an unhealthy obsession to always wonder about that. But it does feel like there's been a different tone about it this year in particular. And I don't, and maybe that just goes along with early success or something like that. But I'm curious, you see both sides of it. You see the local side of it. You see the fans around you, the discussion there, and you are working with people in the national media. Has it changed this year? And if so, what's been, it probably goes to the things that you were talking about, but what's the biggest driver of that? Why has the tone seemed to change so much this year?
Probably just because Dylan resembles Patrick Mahomes so much. That's probably
that's seriously probably a part of it.
It's a real sucker thing for most people. No, I'm kidding. I think that.
But by the way, that's a hook though. That's 100%. I said this to Josh when it happened. I was like, listen, this is going to have so many people. It's going to get him so much more name recognition immediately. That whole thing did, and I fully believe it has.
I remember when they reported for camp in August.
The photo
he walked up with his sister and he looked like Pat wearing his shades and stuff like that. I remember seeing like soon after that, like that same day, Adam Schefter tweeted out the side-by-side image, and I'm like, how does Adam Schefter like know about this? You know what I mean? Like, it's sort of, how is that on NFL people's radar? You know what I mean? Like, it's just, yeah, for something that's a very sticky thing for people, which is kind of funny. But honestly, I think that, like, just working with folks at The Athletic, working with folks at ESPN, like, I think everybody likes Matt Rule. Like, I think there's a very, like, just a high level of respect and appreciation for him, for the jobs that he's had and what he's done at them, for the way he treats folks, the way he treats media. I think there's just like a, you know, I think everyone understands, you know, what he was up against at Baylor and what he did there. Like, I think that, you know, everybody like I can't think of like a national media member who like, oh, it seems like they kind of hate Matt Rule. Like, I just don't think I just don't think that really exists. You know, I think having a very, but that's not like the main thing. The likability isn't the main thing. It's just like, I think people just have a ton of respect for, you know, what he brings to the table, the way he approaches this job and college athletics and stuff like that. Like, I think that helps a lot in terms of like the outside perception of Nebraska right now. And, you know, I think the quarterback is a big deal. I think when you've got that,
I bet
it makes people, you know, want to tune in on a Friday night to see how they play against Illinois. You know what I mean? I think it just, there's a different level. And then, you know, he has a couple highlight plays every game that, you know, are going to blow up on Twitter and stuff like that. Like, I just think that kind of turns people's attention right away. And you know, not just for media folks, but I'm sure for recruits and, you know, locally and all that kind of stuff. Like, it's it definitely seems like people outside of this market understand that like this thing is trending in the right direction.
Max, you know, I think back to when he first got hired, and I read some of the reporting about like his time at Baylor and how he built his operation. In particular, there was some stuff from your old colleague at The Athletic, Sam Kahn, and just like, wow, he's going to try to do something in a way that we don't see anymore. And I guess this kind of goes back to, you know, one of the main things that you cover, and that is the portal. Do you think that like we can say definitively that his style can still work in 2024 versus when he was at Baylor in 17, 18, and 19, or given that he has still only coached, 17 games at Nebraska, and so however this season goes, we could see an influx of transfers or whatever. Like, can we say that definitively, I guess is the best way to ask the question.
I think that if you look at all of the like year one, year two coaches out there, I think Matt Rule's kind of on the low end in terms of interest in building through the portal. And we can sit here and name the hits they've had since they got here in terms of transfers. And you're like, man, that's these guys, you know, especially at wideout this year, you say like, man, they are a lot better than they looked a year ago because of some of the guys they brought in. But I think that I think that philosophically, this guy is not trying to take, you know, 15, 20 transfers a year. I think that if Nebraska starts doing that, either he had a big change in philosophy or they've got a ton of needs, right? I think that that's a different approach to this, and, you know, trying to be that Midwest developmental program that, you know, cranks out the Ty Robinson guys who are, you know, year 5, year 6, you're like, man, he's a monster. You know what I mean? So I think that that's the model. And the thing that covering the sport, you know, and a lot of my coverage in the past involved the Big 12. And so like when you go visit Iowa State, you go visit Kansas State, you go visit Kansas, to me, it was always like Oklahoma State, great example too. It's like, man, these guys have got it figured out. I don't understand why Nebraska under Frost can't figure it out. Like, you know, and obviously talent retention was a huge problem. And now you've got NIL, you hold on to your players a little bit easier. But like, I think getting back to that model of being able to retain talent and develop them over 3-4 years, it's simple, but like that's what Nebraska has to do. That's what Nebraska has been failing to do. And it seems like the staff is really enthusiastic about. That's the approach.
Hey, Max, I had some conversations with people this week about Nebraska's schedule and kind of the debate, you know, how good are the teams they've beaten, how good are the teams they've lost to. There was a lot of that after Illinois, too. I'm curious, what do you think this early schedule, and I'm really talking about Colorado and Illinois in particular, but maybe a little bit of Rutgers, Indiana, too. But I'm really curious, what do you think? Do those games look, you know, better, worse, or about the same? I'm sounding like your optometrist here. Better, worse, or about the same than they did at the time in the week after, in the immediate aftermath when we get to November.
Well, first of all, I think Illinois going 4 quarters with Penn State is telling because, that is to me, that proves that like you are a top 25 caliber team. Because I think Penn State I know Penn State hasn't maybe super been challenged, very much this year, but I do think Penn State has the appearance of like potentially a playoff caliber kind of team. And so for Illinois to be able to hang with them at night in Happy Valley, that tells you they're a real team. So I think that one, that probably should have been exactly what it was, a 50-50 kind of game for Nebraska. I think Colorado has definitely exceeded my expectations post their trip to Lincoln. Yeah. And to me, like I looked at UCF on paper as a team that has a chance to be a sleeper in the Big 12. Colorado went down to Orlando and whooped them. Like that was a surprise to me. That really was, because I think Gus Malzahn has done a really good job of, and heavy portal obviously, but like done a good job of acquiring talent there. And you kind of looked like they had the skill talent to put up a lot of points on Colorado this year and really, establish that they're a Big 12 contender. And Colorado, it was not close. Colorado dominated. And so I think that, and just the way Shadur has played since he played Nebraska, I think he's been super impressive. And like, I understand that like, it's easy to hate and it's easy to be like, oh, this guy, he gets so much attention, he's overrated. He is not overrated. Shadur Sanders is really good. And I think that, he has shown that since he played Nebraska. And so I think that tells you where Nebraska is at defensively. I think obviously they spent all offseason coming up with that plan. It was a great plan. It worked. But I think it tells you what Nebraska's got on defense. So I would be encouraged by what those teams' performances says about the way Nebraska played against them.
Max, let me ask you about Coach Cigs. Indiana and Nebraska are a couple of wins away from a matchup between a 6-0 Indiana and a 5-1 Nebraska, where the Huskers could be playing for a bowl trip and Indiana could be playing for a 7-0 start. What did you learn about him in your reporting? I cannot wait to read that. He has become, I would say, Travis Hunter is certainly, I think, the best player in the sport right now. And maybe it's just the Big Ten of it all and that Nebraska plays them in 2 weeks. I think Cignetti has become my most interesting character in college football.
He's weird.
He's so weird.
Just because he's so weird.
He's so weird.
Like, please tell me he was weird when you talked to him.
Nah, he's cool. He's cool. I think he is so, like, his confidence level obviously shows up, and has showed up from day one since they got that job at Indiana. That he knows he can win wherever he goes, and he brought a bunch of guys with him that have worked with him forever. Obviously, that gives you confidence. He brought 13 players from James Madison to Indiana. That gives you a lot more confidence you can win right away. But man, that guy, like, he has said from day one, we're going to win here. When he was asked by a reporter, hey, what's your pitch to recruits on, what you can do in this program? He said, I win, Google me. He just Google me.
I can't believe he's pulling this off. I can't believe
But he has said from the start, we are going to win, and we're going to win in year one. And they went out and they brought in 54 newcomers this year. That's what you can do now. You can bring, they brought in 30 transfers. They brought in veteran transfers. He's a guy that, when you talk about his philosophy with it, he is not looking to take the kid who was a backup at Georgia for 2 years, who was just behind studs and maybe they're good. He's looking to take proven production. And he took, Rourke from Ohio, Curtis Rourke, who's been excellent for them. They feel like they have a very cutting edge offense. They got a lot better at, across the board with their depth chart through the portal. And, I think they just do an awesome job. And the thing that's surprising to me, I know he felt they would win, but I think their margin of victory through 5 games right now is like plus 178 or something like that. Like they're just killing people. And so and I think the Maryland game they just played was the closest one. So I think that part is surprising to me how dominant it's been. But they've got good players. That guy knows how to evaluate talent. He brought a good staff with him. It usually, and look, I'm sure the schedule helps because it usually doesn't click this fast, but man, that guy knows what he's doing.
Hey Max, how do you think the impending playoff kind of looming over the season has affected how you cover it, how you talk about it, how you kind of just enjoy it, who obviously likes the sport as well? Has it been a net positive, a net negative, or TBD so far during this season, how it affects a regular season?
Yeah, I think that so I mentioned I was in Vegas over the weekend. So I got to, when the UNLV game was in the afternoon, I got to go over to the one of the sports books over at Mandalay Bay to watch the second half of Alabama Georgia. Electric. I didn't place any bets, but it was electric to be in a room full of people who had money on the line because that one swung
Oh my
both ways.
gosh.
That was, and nobody was sitting here like being like, well, I mean, they might play again, so this isn't that special. Like, of course not. You know what I mean? Like you love the biggest games of the week. No differently, I feel like. Now, it was fun sometimes when you had Ohio State, Michigan, and the loser is absolutely effed and life, the sky's falling and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I understand the stakes of that are fun, but like I think this has been good for the sport. I remember when they first came out with this proposal, talking with Bob Bowlesby when he was the commissioner of the Big 12, and he was part of that group that kind of crafted it. And the point he made early on was just that the thing that clicked for me in terms of the way they pitched it was, when you get to November, we're going to have like 40 teams in contention for it. And I think to me, and that's going to be true. Like I think that's true already right now. The increasing the number of games that matter, that you should care about, that you should tune into, and that includes at the group of 5 level. To me, I think that's the positive. And I understand, that we may end up seeing, Ohio State play Oregon 3 times this year or something like that. Like we may get some rematches in the first round that we don't love, stuff like that. But like, I do think it's a positive in terms of the engagement with more teams for a longer period of the season, and not just having, okay, if Nebraska, loses a second game here, if they lose to Indiana, we're not just going to be like, season's over. Like, no, there's a lot to play for all the way through November and stuff. So I think that part, it's a positive. I'm sure once we get into playoff time, people will get kind of sick of all the bracketology and stuff. But, I think it's a good thing.
Max, before the year, I debated between Ole Miss and Tennessee as kind of my, I'm going to pick them to go through the playoff and make it to the championship game. I ended up picking wrong. I went with Ole Miss. I am ultra impressed by Tennessee right now. Obviously, offense is going to get all the headlines, but what the defense did to Oklahoma, until it was garbage time, I thought was ultra impressive. I can't wait to see what happens when they have some of these big games in the next few weeks. The same day Nebraska plays Indiana, they're going to take on Alabama, so that should be a whole lot of fun. What do you see with this Tennessee squad? And have they gone for you from this they could have success and get into the playoff to a legitimate, feels like 98, right, national championship contender?
Yeah, I saw a great tweet this morning from a Twitter account, CFB Film Room, that said opposing running backs, FBS running backs, have gained a total of -8 yards before contact against Tennessee's defense this year.
Wow.
Like they're just crushing on defense. Wow. I mean, and you knew and Josh, I'm totally with you. Like preseason, I had Ole Miss as a lock for the playoff. Tennessee's was tempting, but didn't put him in my preseason. Tennessee's they're going to make the playoff. Unless we saw obviously they had the year a couple years ago when Hendon Hooker got hurt and things kind of fell apart. If Nico gets hurt, different story, obviously. But I think as they are built right now, so impressive. I think they could have blown out Oklahoma if they wanted to. I think they kind of took their foot off the gas a little bit in the second half, played it a little safe because Oklahoma's defense is really good and they didn't want to make mistakes and stuff like that. But I think Tennessee, offensively, what you're going to get. They use the entire field. They've got great talent at wide receiver. They've got good running backs. They've got a really good quarterback. And then defensively, I think the only thing people knew about them going in was that James Pierce is going to be a first rounder, but I think they've done a really nice job at all 3 levels of that defense. It's just Heupel probably doesn't get enough credit. Especially when they landed Nico, everybody's just well, they paid $8 million. So of course they landed Nico and stuff. But I think that thing is, and it was so dysfunctional before him too. He can't forget that. He has got that thing really looking great, and excited to see them line up with the best team. Certainly when you watch Alabama, Georgia, you're okay, that's where the standard is in terms of being a national contender. So can Tennessee show up for those games this year? Fun to see, but yeah, they've got to figure it out over there for sure.
I always say this to Josh, when you're in the summer and you're talking about the upcoming college football season, which we do ad nauseum, Josh and I do, because, after about the 4th of July, it's all that we're thinking about. And you start to develop this group think about what the season will look like and who will be there, who won't be there, who will be successful. And I always tell Josh, it's all, man, it is we are going to be dead wrong about some of this stuff that we said all freaking summer long. It always happens. We never realize it, but it's going to happen again. I'm curious, what do you think the biggest things for you maybe are you surprised about now that we're in the first week of October? Is it a Florida State? Is it, what USC has done successfully? What are those stories for you that you look back and you're like, man, I did not see that coming in late summer?
But you're totally right about the group thing. And one thing I noticed this year, just maybe because of the 12-team playoff, that kind of cracked me up is like everybody agreed on kind of who the best teams were throughout the offseason.
Yeah.
And then in August, there's like a real weird turn at the very end where people are like, well, I mean, it can't be all the favorites in the playoffs. So we got to find some dark horse wild cards. And so I was getting texts from people, national writers being like, am I dumb if I put Nebraska in my bracket? And it's like, what are we talking about? What do you mean? But
That's
like,
freaking hilarious.
But that's how it is, right? It can't go that perfectly, right? There's got to be some surprises.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think probably the whiffs have been more surprising to me. I think certainly Florida State, like, and I, if you ask me the preseason, I would tell you, man, they do maybe a better job than anybody in terms of transfer portal evaluation and being able to year after year go load up on players out of the portal and be, at the top of the ACC. I think they just kind of missed this year. I mean, certainly DJ's DJ. I mean, nobody's surprised that hasn't, that he hasn't, taken his game to another level. But like internally, they believe like, yeah, he's setting up to have a great year. Like I think internally, their assessment of a lot of their talent was like, you saw Pete Thamel say it in preseason, like they think they've got the best defensive line in the country and things like that. And it's just like you go watch them against the middle tier ACC teams. You're like, oh no, what has happened here? Florida State surprises me. I think Kansas has been very surprising. I think on paper, it's such a veteran team, and you get a healthy Jalen Daniels. I thought they'd be a Big 12 contender, no question. And that to me, it's a testament to Andy Kotelnicki, and just he's excellent at his job. And I think that I'm not saying Jeff Grimes is a bad coach, but I just think that change in terms of offensive coordinator has set them back. And I think that certainly Penn State looks different. Kansas looks different. I think Kotelnicki's really, really good. And but surprising to me, it hasn't all added up for Kansas. There's some of those where you're just sort of like, man, how did we get here? I think Oklahoma looks like they're turning the corner, but Oklahoma early on looked a lot worse than I expected to. I think the Michael Hawkins move is going to help them a lot, because Jackson Arnold, expectations could have been higher for Jackson Arnold going into this year, and I'm surprised that one hadn't worked.
Max, one more from me. If you would have told me before Bama, Georgia, that the score would have ended 41-34 Alabama, I would have said, interesting. I don't know if that's going to teach us a whole lot. They will probably be what I expected. But, of course, the game flow, it tells quite this story of Alabama's great start, Georgia's great comeback, and then, what ended up happening at the very end. Who did we learn more about in that game? Because I definitely think you can make an argument for either team, good and bad. Who did you learn more about from that result?
Yeah, the one thing that we like at the end of Saturday night, I got to send in top 25 like power rankings and top 16 for FWA and stuff. And I remember like at halftime of that game, I was like, all right, I guess I got to put Georgia like 5 or 6 or whatever. And then like by the end of the game, you're like, what am I supposed to do with them? Because like that was awesome. Like, how did they do that? You know what I mean? And if you saw the video of Kirby Smart after the game, like I think you could tell like he was extremely impressed by what his team did and the way they just kept playing. And so like, yeah, I think if you're a Georgia fan, you're like, we're going to be okay, because I was surprised by, I think the play of Carson Beck is surprising. Like, I think, yes, he got in a situation in the second half where he had to throw them out of danger. And, obviously they came back. And so, and he put up, I think 439 passing yards or whatever, but I think he went like 27 for 50, turned it over 4 times. He had not been that kind of player to not take care of the ball the way that he struggled to against Alabama. And so, for a guy that was being held up as the potential number 1 overall pick, that part I'm interested to see kind of where's his growth from here, because you remember he's only started like 15 games. Like he's still got a lot of room to grow. So that part I'm interested to see kind of where Georgia goes from here. I mean, Kalen DeBoer is that dude. He's awesome. Right. I mean, don't we just have to say it? Like, yeah. And I kind of
Sioux Falls, shout out Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
I felt like I didn't think Alabama was going to be like some sort of 8-14 this year. in part because like I think if you give the head coach of Fresno State the talent of Alabama, they're probably thinking like, yeah, we're gonna figure it out. Like Kalen DeBoer's never had access to this kind of blue chip talent, and so to take what they do, and then to go out and get Kane Womack to be his DC, who's one of the best in the country. Like they've made all the right decisions in terms of year one at Alabama. It's amazing how smooth it's been, honestly, in going from Nick Saban to anybody else. But he's looking like, the ideal hire for that spot. And, I think you're seeing Jalen Milroe play at like a Heisman type level, which I think a lot of people were not sure if he could do that coming out of last year. It's so impressive.
Last question for you before we get you going. And thank you for the time today. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
You said you're going to be in Boulder this Saturday. Give me what a Saturday like that looks for you when you're traveling or even when you're at a home game, because you're simultaneously, I'm sure, working on a story, but you also have to have the big picture of the college football world, right? How do you do those simultaneously on a Saturday?
Yeah, it's hard to do, to have like the bandwidth of like monitoring every FBS game or every Power 4 game. It's just hard to do. I think that usually I'm happy to be sitting at home on my couch on a Saturday to just try to catch as many games as possible. And you feel a little bit wiped out by the end of it because it's probably too much football to watch. But that's probably my happy place, honestly, is just to be able to, go down to the basement at 11 a.m. and watch football until midnight, and that's, so when you're at a stadium, when you're on the road, just really hard to, and then when they put a game on Peacock, right? Like I wasn't able to catch very much in Nebraska Purdue, to be honest. So I think that part, the FOMO of like all the other games that are going on while you're, down on a sideline pregame, or you're locked in on the game you're covering, that part can be tough. For years at the Athletic, I would do the Saturday takeaways, and that's very hard to do when you're on location somewhere, because there's just too much football to watch and too much to catch. But certainly Twitter helps a ton. And I think, the advent now of the multi-views with YouTube TV is amazing, just to be able to watch as much football as possible. That's why I went to the Mandalay Bay, not to gamble, but just to have as many screens on as possible. That's my preferred college football experience, is as many my eyeballs on as many games as humanly possible.
Twitter helps. I bet my tweets help during the Purdue game for you to keep up.
Of course.
Every 5 minutes or so, just all caps holding. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Holding. The holding calls aren't there today, I guess.
Now Max knows that there have been uncalled holds in this game. So
I did see some tweets about the officiating crew being garbage, and it's funny to read those without any context of what has happened. Like, it just, y'all fire those out without any clip attached. So it was funny when I
don't know how to do that. I don't know
when I looked at the box score of Nebraska Purdue at halftime, having not seen any highlights. I looked at just the box score, and you see the total yards and first downs and stuff. I was looking at it, I'm like, I bet they're missing their kicks today, and they were missing their kicks.
Oh, indeed they were.
Not all on the kicker in that.
That'd be a fun game. Get a box score and tell me the story of this game.
Tell me the score and what happened. Yeah, right.
That'd be a good game show during the summer.
That's a good summer topic, Jack. Let's put a pin in that for July when we're bored out of our minds.
All right.
Max, dude, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for giving. We promised a certain amount of time. You gave us a little bit more time than that, but we really appreciate it. Tell people where they can check out your stuff.
Yeah, ESPN.com, and you can follow me on Twitter, Max_Olson. That's where you can find my work. And I had to lock my Instagram after some Colorado fans came after me in the spring.
Yeah,
in a very personal way. So don't find me on Instagram. Don't find me on Instagram. Yeah.
There you go. Right, and you can also find him at Mahoney Park coming up this spring on probably Monday nights.
Unless you're a Colorado fan, then leave him alone.
Yeah, then leave him. Oh, we got a bunch of guys that'll defend him. Don't you worry.
It's okay. Comes with the territory. But hey, guys, I appreciate it. Love chatting, and happy to hop on anytime.
Thank you very much, Max. Subscribe to the I-80 Club, whether it's here on YouTube. We'll be back live on Saturday night for free at 9:30, recapping Nebraska Rutgers and the day in college football. But patreon.com/I-80 Club. If you would like to support more independent work like this, again, Max Olson of ESPN.com. For Jack, I'm Josh. We will talk to you Saturday morning. Thank you so much for joining us.